I call the December 20th, 2023 Apple Valley Planning Commission meeting to order. Good evening. The first item of business is the approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff?
Madam Chair, there are no changes for tonight.
Thank you. Commissioners?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Schindler and seconded by Commissioner Scanlon. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The next item of business tonight is the consent agenda. The consent agenda items are considered routine and will be enacted with a single motion without discussion unless a commissioner or a citizen requests to have any items separately considered. It will then be moved to the land use action items for consideration. Do I have an approval for the minutes in the regular meeting?
So moved.
Second.
That was moved by Commissioner Schindler and seconded by Commissioner Scanlon. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. That brings us to number 4, and we do have a public hearing tonight with the Wings Credit Union Ordinance Amendment. So tonight I will open. We will now open the public hearing for agenda item 4A. The affidavit of publication for the notice of public hearing is available for inspection in the planning department. Everyone wishing to speak at this public hearing should be sure to fill out the attendance roster. Please include your name and your address so that accurate records can be maintained. We will begin the procedure with a brief presentation by city staff, followed by a presentation by the petitioner of the hearing. Upon the conclusion of the presentation, city staff will be asked to comment on the proposal's conformance with pertinent regulations and policies. After that, comments will be taken from the general public. Planner Sharp.
Thank you, Chair Kurtz. As noted, this is a public hearing. However, as the Planning Commission has reviewed this item on 2 separate occasions through the variance application that I'll go through shortly, staff is recommending that an action be taken this evening. The action being requested by the applicant is to amend Ordinance PD 290, Plan Development 290, Zone 3 to allow a 20-foot tall, 80-square-foot sign. You'll have a more detailed action towards the end of the report. Excuse me, as I noted, the applicant applied for a variance for the sign previously, was reviewed by the Planning Commission at 2 separate meetings, and ultimately, due to the provisions in the ordinance, was unable to be recommended for approval by the Commission. The chair withdrew the applicant withdrew their application, and during that process was encouraged by the Planning Commission to come forward for a text amendment. So there was clearly some form of support, and that is where this item is before the Planning Commission this evening. I'll go over kind of the brief overview of the site and stuff still, but move through this relatively quickly. The site is 14985 Glacier Avenue. It is Wings Credit Union headquarters, and a branch location is the highlighted parcels noted here. The sign location is proposed in the northwest corner. It will be redone. We do have, with the realignment of 147th, we do have a staff map with that that is also being used by the applicant to locate their newly proposed sign. That has been agreed on lightly by both parties and meets setback requirements, so you don't see anything in your ordinance provision about that 13 feet. One of the key aspects of this application is that it only affects Zone 3 of Plan Development 290. Zone 3 is in the red highlighted area or boxed in area that you see here that essentially affects 6 different properties. Those properties are owned by Wings and Nystrom Associates. So it is the Wings Financial Credit Union, or I'm sorry, they've changed the name. It's Wings Credit Union, Wings Mortgage, and Commons 1. The amendment would not affect any other properties in the limited business zone, so it is tailored just to this, and would not affect other properties within that planned development zone. The properties within Plan Development 290 Zone 3 were notified of the public hearing as per process. This is a photo of the existing sign just for reference. It is slightly smaller and slightly less height than what is permitted in the zone. The zone allows for up to an 8-foot high sign and 40 square feet for single tenant, 60 square feet for multi-tenant. Because they could vary within this building, that they do have multi-tenants, It's always been put that they could have up to a 60 square foot sign. What is being requested is a 20-foot tall, 80 square foot sign. One of the things I'm going to do is go through quite a few signs here, and for some of the smaller ones within the planned development, I'm not going to go through the area because many of them were put up before we have some of the good records to tell how large and how tall these are. We know that they are, from a visual examination, I've walked by most of these signs, 8 feet or less, and they are relatively small in that 30 to 40 square foot area. But one of the things that I wanted to go through with other larger signs such as this one is how the sign area is calculated. So the way that our sign ordinance requires that staff evaluate a sign area is by drawing a box around it like this. So this red box is the area that we end up drawing. And the reason why we end up having to do so is because this digital medium goes all the way out to the end. If the sign digital medium ended here, we could take this entire edge off. You'll see examples of where we can do that in other signs and how they can end up looking differently based upon their area, but wanted to start noting it with this sign early. This is the diagram that I had noted previously. This is for the proposed location for the sign. It is something that will still be worked on and I would say finalized with our city engineer and the applicant. However, it would meet the 13-foot setback, and at this time, there is no discussion of that needing to be any closer or anything along those lines. So we have kind of a location for the proposed sign that, at least at this point, meets everyone's requirements. You've seen these before. These are the signs that are more difficult to find the area of, with the exception of the Cowboy Jacks and American one, and that is because the Planning Commission granted a variance to allow that sign several years ago. That one is only 22 square feet though. It is quite small, and it is not even a full 8 feet tall. It's only around 7 feet 2 inches tall. Most of the signs throughout the district though are around that 8 feet in height, and then somewhere around a 4 by 8, so 32 square feet maximum size area. Most of these within the district do not meet the larger 40 or 60 square feet. You will see some, such as the ones at Commons 1, that do start to get a little bit larger, but they're still only at that 40 to maybe 50 square feet and 8 feet in height. So most of the signs within this district have not chosen to utilize their full size that they were allotted, and when they were allotted, sign design at the time that they were installed was likely different. Because of that inability for staff to have those records, and the applicant's request being something slightly larger than these anyways, we've got a lot of detail on some of the larger signs and that scope in between the 8 and 20 coming up. So we'll start with something that looks very, very large. So Menard's sign is 23 feet in height. It's 102 square feet. That red box shows you the area that it's calculated. It looks significantly more massive than what the area would account for. And the red box is supposed to come right up underneath the letters, but there, you can see there's a little bit of a swoop there that is part of their design. If that swoop was not there, our box would actually go up right to the bottom of the letters and they'd be allowed slightly larger. This is a retail business-based zoning district. It is allowed 24 feet high and 110 square feet. Abdallah was right on the cusp of us switching over to digital signs, so we don't have a good old paper copy of it, but we do have the records from what were put into the permit software. So this was a 15-foot height and 108 square feet. It is similar in many ways to what Wings is looking at doing, minus Wings was finishing the base out versus having that raised off the ground, and but does include the digital and static combination. You will notice that it is slightly larger. Industrial zones are the same as retail business. They are allowed to have the 24-foot tall, 110 square feet. Mr. Car Wash is very similar in area, though very different in style. So Mr. Car Wash sign, I've got some photos of it taken recently as well to try to give you some perspective on it. It is 20 feet tall, so the applicant's height request, but significantly wider than what Wings is seeking. It is approximately 85 square feet, and again, that is calculated by doing this box. So when staff evaluated this, we did not need to get a full sign size of what that box actually was. And the reason being is they're allowed to go up to 110. And so we already knew by taking the 8 by 12 that they were under that, and we were able to proceed with approval. In order for the calculation purposes for this exercise, we've had to try to approximate based upon the scale of the sign on the drawing. So we've done as best as we could, but it's not perfectly 85. Starbucks, this was an existing sign from an existing gas station. It was there prior to the site. It is a retail business-based zoning district, so it would be allowed the 24 feet in height. Where it is non-compliant and why they chose to retain it is, you'll notice just how close it is to that property line. And so in this case, the applicant decided that it was more important to be very, very close to Cedar than it was to get the size and height that they would otherwise be allowed. American was reviewed by the Planning Commission 2 years ago. American has had a number of issues with trucks, semi-trailers that are staying at the site hitting their sign. They sought to go slightly higher. They're already one of these signs that was put in at a time frame before our signed ordinance existed. So they're existing as a 26 foot tall, or 26 4-inch foot tall sign at 149 square feet, and they were looking to go to 28 and even larger. It was not supported by the Planning Commission unanimously, and they withdrew their application. With that one, I'm going to pause for just a moment. You will notice that there are several other signs throughout the community that are taller than 24 feet. Some of these are from eras before we had a sign ordinance established. One of the better examples that I was able to locate today was Famous Dave's along 147th. That one is quite large and quite tall. We don't have good records on that. Others, such as the one at Regency Centers, which is Chase Bank, where the Perkins is located out front of. Another example is Fisher Marketplace. They can get conditional use permits or amend their plan development to allow for those bigger, taller signs. That is close to what we're doing here with the bigger, taller sign with PD 290. So Fisher Marketplace followed all of the regulations of getting a conditional use permit for a shopping center sign. These signs are typically taller and include multiple tenants as part of the reason. You'll notice that down also in Cobblestone. Since they weren't as pertinent to this discussion about a single user / not a multi-tenant mall type site, we don't have photos of those, but could provide them. This is a very recent sign of Lunds and Byerly's, 20 foot in height, 65 square feet in area based upon where the box ends up being located. And that does include the wasted space between the two spots. So it's similar to Wings, how their box has some wasted space between the, and I don't know, negative space is probably the better word for it, between the digital and the logo. Think Bank, across the street, 24 foot in height, 36 square feet. Looks quite massive, and then when you put the box around it, ends up being relatively small. Pennock Center is an existing legal non-conforming. We do not have good records as to its full area. Estimation at 56 square feet. And I believe, last but not least, Apple Valley Liquor, our own, so that I can pick on us just a little bit here. 20 foot in height, 12 foot width, 95 square feet. Again, allowed that 110, and including that static and digital image. In this case, because the Apple Valley Liquor extends over to the sides, the box goes beyond, similar to how you saw how Wings was calculated. There are other ways that that cities calculate sign area. However, this has been the consistent way that the city of Apple Valley has done it since I believe, the beginning of our ordinance. One of the things I wanted to provide the commission with was a table of comparable communities. Rather than go through all of this in great detail, my summary is essentially, in office, we're fairly consistent on height. We are somewhere on the low end, probably on area. In terms of retail zoning, I put this caveat in your report. It's difficult to put this many asterisks in a table. This was taken for community zoning districts that are not highway adjacent. This was not their highway commercial. We don't have the 65-mile-per-hour roadways, so what I was looking for was downtowns, and that's where Rosemont's varies drastically, and why I have that asterisk there. But there are several of these that are affected when you are within distance of a highway. You'll notice that in the notes, and just want to make it very, very apparent, because that could skew the data if you were just use those highway zones. And so I was trying to find very comparable data. One of the other lessons that I can see from the table is that the sign height at around 20 feet is consistent with a lot of these more retail-esque spaces. As I noted at the very beginning of this, Wings is a interesting mix. It's their corporate headquarters, but it also happens to be a retail location with a branch. So there is a dual use there. That does it apply? And I think that's the question being posed before the Planning Commission is, what is appropriate? Somewhere at that 20 range with their retail or not? I've got the exact amendment language here if you want to review it. Essentially, it is just affecting that Zone 3, and want to emphasize that, as this could be seen by the Planning Commission as a Wings campus and therefore wanting to stand out. This could be seen in a number of different ways. It's a policy level discussion at this point. We do have a recommended action, and essentially what the recommended action is this evening from staff is that an action be taken. One of the things that I was trying to emphasize through this action in your staff report is that the Planning Commission must act on the application as submitted. However, that does not limit the Planning Commission from then, let's say, if there was a concern with acting on that or it were to not pass, the Commission could then make a recommendation and would be strongly encouraged to do so about what would be supported. Of course, the Commission could support this outright, and no need for that caveat. With that, happy to go back to any photos, answer whatever questions I'm able. The applicant is present, and I'm sure would like to be able to present their case as well.
Sure. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Alex? Go ahead, Commissioner Pruitt.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. Alex, if you could expand just a little bit on the notifications that were sent out. I think you commented early in the presentation about notifying those in PD 290 Zone 3. Were the adjacent properties also notified? And more, I guess I'm wondering about the applications. There weren't a lot of details here with Aspen Dental, Jersey Mike's, Pancheros. Those are adjacent. And did they seek, I wasn't involved when they had sought approval of signage that was denied. Were they notified, and what was the end result? They put smaller signs in, I assume, or?
So I'll start, Chair Kurtz, Commissioner Pruitt, I'll start with answering the question of the notification. When you are amending a zone such as what we are doing, the only notification requirements is to the properties within that subzone.
Yep.
So only Zone 3 was notified. If we were required to notify additional properties, other past amendments that the Commission would work on, such as Clover Life Spa, would have required notification of every property within Cobblestone.
Very good.
So that is why we do it this way. We are not legally required to notify those properties, and it is against past practice, at least, to reach out and attempt to notify when we're not legally obligated to do so.
Thank you.
Secondarily, the background on Aspen Dental is because of the way their logo is set up, they have a high point A. They were getting a lot of negative space counted in their box. They needed to essentially shrink down that A, and it was only for their building wall signage that they were seeking that variance.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Scanlon?
Madam Chair, could you bring up the Byerly's ones?
Well, now I need to remember which order they were in.
I think it's back. There it is. So that's an example of 20 feet. And
as was the Mr. Car Wash, if you need to.
Right.
It's hard to get perspectives on these.
Yeah,
Um,
and then
right.
with the pillars are basically at 10 feet then, if I'm looking here correctly.
So
think
this
10?
pillar goes up to 14,
Yeah.
14 foot 11 inches.
Oh, excuse me, the width, what I meant
Oh,
by the width
yes.
there. And then
Yep.
the height is 20 overall. I'm just concerned with what we're looking at here at 20 feet might be a little strong on the height. I don't have a concern with the width.
And width isn't dictated on code.
Yeah.
I'm just looking
Right,
to give
yeah,
you
just
something to go off.
based on what they're presented here and
Yeah.
so forth, that I had a concern with the 20 feet, especially using this example here, which I think gives us some pretty good perspective of height and then also so forth by looking at it. So my question then would be, what would be considered agreeable over and above the, it's currently coded at, we're currently at 8 feet max, correct?
Correct.
So, yeah, I mean, are we looking at 16 or 18 feet? It just seems to me that it needs to be not as high, but,
Chair Kurtz, Commissioner Scanlon, there isn't going to be a perfect
correct.
best practice. Planning 101 says you shall do this when you're dealing with the 2 feet like that, or frankly, probably anywhere in between those two. There probably isn't going to be something perfect. It's about the community of Apple Valley, what we've done, what we see,
Yeah,
and what you said is policy.
Right, and to retain that, and you kind of you kind of go through that in your report, which was thorough in terms of not having signage, is the correct term I want to use, having signage that interferes with others within the commercial group, that, the one sign gets mixed into the other. And I understand what Wings is doing here with wanting to bring more visibility to the campus, and I'm supportive of that. I just, like I said, I'm a bit concerned though with the height, and then what, my colleagues here had some feedback onto what might be more acceptable to that, or if they think 20 is appropriate, so. I'm thinking maybe 16, 18 as a reference, so.
I think 20 feet is an overkill. I think it's too high, and personally in that area. I'm even looking at where the columns are for 14 feet, and I think 14 feet is, I think 16 to me is too high.
Okay.
I think it's 14 feet. If you look at the pillars like that. David, what are your thoughts, Commissioner David?
Madam Chair, I also feel that 20 seems a little bit too much. But I could live with 16.
Higher than those
That's
pillars?
probably about as,
What was the Alex, what was the
Do you have-
16, the car wash? Forgot which one.
Hannock.
16.
Center is 16.
Oh.
Also, the applicant is present, and
Sure.
yeah.
Yes,
it would be good to hear their perspectives and
Okay.
the purpose behind the 20-foot
Yep.
choice and
Well,
all that.
yep,
So-
we'll get there, absolutely. So this is 16 feet high. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it seems excessive. I guess I wondered a little bit about, currently the sign seems concealed by landscaping, but when you see them wide open, it seems pretty large. I mean, that's on a higher speed highway out there when you see the Lunds and Byerleys, and it's still extremely noticeable. So I would concur. 20 seems large for that area.
Applicant, I don't remember your last name, I'm so sorry.
Tom Schenke.
Shanky, would you like to be,
I think that the
come on up.
challenge that we've got is,
Wait till you get to the mic here.
design of the sign itself. As you go up and go wide, the proportionality of it is something that we have to play with. So, can we fit it into 16 feet? Can we fit it into 14 feet? We can always do something.
Can you bring us, I'm sorry, Alex, can you bring us to their sign, please, while he's talking? Thank you. Sorry, Mr.
My
Shanky.
apologies, I should have done that.
No worries.
Going the wrong way.
Perfect, thank you.
And this is the one that's showing the 20-foot, yeah. So, proportionally right now, if we were to stay within existing code, I believe we could put what's the total sign square footage? 60. So we could put a 6-foot tall, 10-foot wide sign on that property. It would be approved by city staff and off we go. There's no issue with it because it meets code. We don't want to do that.
As a quick note, that would only be the copy area.
Correct. So we could put it on top of a base that's a lot wider. We think this is a very good representation of things that we've done in communities like Otsego, Maple Grove, Lakeville, Northfield, Rochester, Baxter. This is our new sign style. The signs that we have in Baxter and Rochester are 40-foot tall. Granted, they're on much more higher density and speed roadways. We're looking for a 20-foot tall limit. This is the representation of the sign at that limit. Really, it kind of comes down to, do we really like to have the 80 square feet? And then we can play around with the design. If the commission is, against 20 foot, I guess that's your prerogative. I can't argue with that, other than to say that I'm not sure what a 20-foot sign in that position blocks the view. It blocks the view of our building more than blocks anything, and it doesn't really create any sort of traffic issue relative to its position on the corner at an angle. And we think it's a nice looking sign compared to, maybe some of the things that were done back in the day that were much higher than this at 24 feet. You saw some examples. I'm not going to belittle anybody else's sign, but I think we've done a pretty good job of creating a sign here that, fits our new look. We opened our new branch today, and I sent Alex a picture late in the afternoon. I was going to see if we could get it in, but the inside of that branch really fits to this type of a sign and the look and the design, and we're just trying to keep that consistent. So,
Commissioner Schindler?
Madam Chair, if you were to say you designed it to be 18 feet, what would that change?
I'd have to refer back to the sign vendor, and we'd have to play with the width. And it really kind of comes down to the maximum sign area. So if you approve the 80 square foot and you say, we'll approve a 16-foot or 18-foot tall sign, but we'll give you 80 square feet, then we've got to play with that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Madam Chair, I have a question in terms of what's been presented on a couple of different pictures here, and maybe the sign vendor has to step in and talk about this. The representation that you're showing on the screen right now shows the sign supposedly at 20 feet, about maybe a little bit halfway up the evergreen on the left. And then if I look at the one in the staff report, it's nearly as tall as the evergreen to the left. So there's a scaling differentiation here. That's not, this seems,
Yeah, go ahead.
That's likely due to updated graphic material piece here. Mm-hmm. Please note that the slight berm that you're seeing here would not be there. This is representative of approximately where the existing sign is. Lots of things would change with the realignment of that corner.
right.
This is trying to show a 20-foot, largely at-grade sign.
I'm
And
just
that is what it would be.
So visually, roughly, that would look like
Yes.
about that height.
Right, I'm just
Yes.
trying to get a perspective on it, and there's,
I don't
Quite a
believe many
difference
of those
between the
evergreens
two
are
that I'm
going to be
looking
able
at.
to be retained at this time.
yeah.
So those as a visual reference may not remain. But I believe that the intent was to have it at largely at grade.
Correct.
With whatever the finished is.
Correct.
obviously a different angle, because in the staff report, the sign's above the building height.
When you look at this one, there's no comparison between the
Yeah,
two.
there's the two of them.
I don't think we're looking for a 120-foot square or 120-foot tall sign.
So that's what's kind of throwing some of the discussion off, I think, but.
Mr. Shanky, I have a few comments. I think the first time this was presented, I think I asked you then, what is imprinted underneath the what do you call it, digital or whatever, like Apple Valley 4th of July? What was all of that again, below that?
So where it says Apple Valley 4th of July Parade this weekend, is
And
that,
below that where it says decorative slats, open airflow. So that's going to be
Nothing.
nothing. That's just going to be,
Yep. If you drove by the Lakeville sign out at Pilot Knob and County 46, I think it is, this is that sign, except that sign does not have the digital reader board.
okay.
So below that reader board, the digital reader board is just a
Reader board.
blank blue panel. And then those are slats. I believe they're 6 inches wide. And
Just for the airflow.
just airflow middle slats, yeah.
Got it. Got it. And I know that you want this sign, primarily, you said at the first meeting, was for applicants and people coming into no visibility where they're coming into. In my opinion, I believe the Wings building is probably one of the tallest in Apple Valley, and I can see Wings from afar, as I won't see that sign from afar until I get up there. Also, I just drove by that area, and to me, when I'm driving, I don't really visually see that top of it. To me, if you brought it down, it's more visual to the person in the car than it is not. I just would like to see it a little bit lower, in my opinion, like I said. But can I ask you if that we did come to that agreement of lowering it to a different size, would you be in support of that?
You know, we're at this stage of the game, we'd like to get the sign done.
Sure.
I'll go back to the 80 square foot. If you maintain the 80 square foot of sign, and you say that we need to stay at the 16-foot level, then, you know, if that can be done tonight, I think that Alex was saying that you would have to decline the amendment and then make a recommendation to approve a 16 by 80.
Correct.
So if you would do that, I think, you know, we'll move on.
I'm going to bring Mr. Benetti into this. Can I ask you that question? If we lowered it and if we went to, say, 14 or 16 feet, do they still get that amount of square footage? Or does that change perspective?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, you have the right to offer any recommendation back to our council members for final decision-making. So what you determine or decide tonight, if it meets the approval of the applicant, that would be fine. That can be done. But remember, we still have this, the action before you tonight is to approve a 20-foot
Understood.
height with an 80 square foot. So
Understood.
there's nothing wrong with denying that, then making a subsequent motion. Or Sharon, can they just amend the original action motion, or should they just take action one and
Yep.
do a subsequent?
Yeah, completely understand.
Madam Chair, yes, you would act on the application. If it fails for recommended approval, you may make a motion making a recommendation of what you would support, and then that would go to council for their consideration. But they would act on the application, but they then have your group recommendation as to what you do support.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does that make it then, if it goes lower, does it make it wider necessarily, or does it just make less of that airflow to get that square footage in
We've
there?
got to play around with it a little bit and see. It's hard. I would say, Chris, it probably,
Just drops down, the pole cover drops down,
Yeah.
and the design element ladders drop down.
doesn't necessarily make it wider right off the bat. I mean, well, maybe slightly, but
Okay,
not proportionally, let's put it that way.
okay. Commissioner Scanlon?
Madam Chair, I don't have any issue with the design, which we don't
Right.
really have a say in. So there is no concern with there and what you're doing with your new branding and understanding of that. You've mentioned some of your similar signs to that. Do you have any of those examples with you
I
that
do
you
not.
can bring up at all to help us a little bit? And I think going back to what was just discussed here, our only,
You had it in your
Yeah, that was in our first presentation.
okay, if, our concern is if we drop it down to between 16 and 14 feet, is that going to change the need for the 80 feet? Or how does that,
We would just
Get
like to keep
affected.
the 80 square foot sign area.
okay, so then what you're saying, and I'm looking at this here, the 80-foot, like Alex has explained, is the red outline.
Correct.
So basically, all you're going to do
Just drop it down. and
is drop
maybe
it
there's-
down accordingly, whether that's 4 feet or 6 feet,
Yeah.
and move on. Is basically what
Preferably,
you're doing.
preferably stay at least the 16-foot level.
All right. I think
That would be our.
clarifies the 80-foot concern maybe that we had.
Right.
So, and the width, that wouldn't be changing, it was just gonna be the height, so.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Shanky? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Alex, can we have you again? I guess I have a question on motion, okay? So if we make motion on the first one, but on the second motion, if it was a, deny, can we hold off on that to decide on the square footage, or should we have to go through, do you understand what I'm saying? No?
I'm not quite.
Well,
If we-
Madam Chair, it needs to go to council because the clock is ticking.
Got it, okay.
So,
I was just,
We're
Curious
still within
about
the
this.
first 60 days,
yes, but
but if the commission can provide a recommendation this evening, I think that with the amount of meetings it has been at, it would be respectful to try to move this along with
Totally
the
understand.
applicant, if possible.
just wanted to ask that question, so thank you. Okay, do we have any sort of discussion more or completed, and somebody want to make a motion?
Go ahead.
Commissioner Schindler?
Madam Chair, I was just going to say that I would be comfortable with keeping the 80 square foot, and I would be okay with 16.
Okay,
That's my opinion, obviously. I think I'm comfortable with 16.
okay. Thank you. Commissioner Scanlon?
I'm also okay with the 80, going to the 80-foot, and I guess just looking at, since we've discussed 16, 14, compromise, just split the difference and say 15 feet.
Input, Commissioner Pruitt?
Yeah, I mean, just basically looking at adjacent properties, and I appreciate that the group and the planning department prepared and provided us with the adjacent cities zoning sign sizes. I think 80 foot seems a little more consistent in fitting with the surrounding communities. Sign height, certainly 20 feet seems extreme.
Okay. In my opinion, I would be okay with either 14 or 16, and I would prefer 60 square foot, but it sounds like everybody is okay with the 80, so. Anybody willing to make a motion?
Could you bring those up, Alex, please?
I just think keeping it at an even number.
Just don't get dizzy.
Madam Chair, I recommend denial of an amendment to Chapter 155, Appendix F, Article 2 of the Apple Valley City Code revising Section A2-5, A6 to allow the installation of a freestanding ground sign with a maximum height of 20 feet and a total signage area not to exceed 80 square feet.
Second.
Okay, the motion was made by Commissioner Scanlon, and it was seconded by Commissioner Schindler. Is there any discussion on this? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. That motion carries.
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of an amendment to Chapter 155, Appendix F, Article 2 of the Apple Valley City Code, revising sections A2-5, A6 to allow the installation of a freestanding ground sign with a maximum height of 14 feet and a total signage area not to exceed 60 square feet. Or, excuse me, I apologize. The total signage area not to exceed 80 square feet. I apologize.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Okay. That was made by Commissioner Scanlon, the motion, and seconded by Commissioner Pruitt. Now any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. So this will be brought then to the city council next week?
No,
January.
January.
January for discussion. Okay? Again, we appreciate Wings, and hopefully this will be okay. Thank you for your time. I guess I have to close public hearing.
How do we do that? Miss that.
Is that okay still to do?
Just close it.
To close, okay, if there are any further comments, I will close this public hearing. It is the policy of the Planning Commission not to act on an item on the same night of the public hearing. The Planning Commission will weigh all comments and information received tonight in its deliberations at future meetings. This item will continue to appear on future Planning Commission agendas until a recommendation on the petition can be forwarded to the City Council. And just to notify that there were nobody present for comments. Okay, that brings us to number 5. We have no land use tonight. Number 6, other business, and I will ask upon Tim Benetti for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Just a reminder, your next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, January 3rd at 7 p.m., followed by a Wednesday, January 17th, 2024. Again, that's the beginning of the new year. We also have council on 28th and January 11th respectively. This item will be on the January 11th agenda, the Wings financial or Wings sign issue that tonight. Just also want to wish each and every one of you a very Merry Christmas, safe travels, happy holidays, and let us know if you need anything from now until the next meeting, but we hope to see you next year.
Thank you, same to you.
Thank you.
Move we adjourn?
I'll second that.
Motion to adjourn was made by Commissioner Schindler and seconded by Commissioner Scanlon. Any other further discussions? If not, we approve, say aye.
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 This meeting has been adjourned.